Hard eye. First night on the job when you are broke and stranded in the kind of town that does not even show up on most maps. You take whatever work you can find. For me, that was the Bluebird Diner. Aging little restaurant wedged between a shuttered gas station and an abandoned feed store. The sign flickered weakly. The neon bird's wings stuck mid-flap. Inside, the air smelled of bacon grease and lemon disinfectant. A bell over the door jingled as I stepped in, and for a moment, I felt almost safe. The manager was a gaunt woman named Fran. Her hair was pulled so tight, it made her eyebrows arch unnaturally high, and her smile was the kind that never quite reached her eyes. She slid me an apron and said, "Night shift. Huh? Just remember, don't stare at the customers. Ever." I laughed, thinking it was small-town humor. She did not laugh back. The first few hours were uneventful. A trucker sipped coffee at the counter. A young couple shared a plate of fries in the corner booth, and an elderly man read a newspaper that looked decades out of date. The jukebox in the corner played an old country tune that crackled like an ancient record, but there was something odd about the place. Every clock on the walls ticked out of sync. The shadows under the booths seemed deeper than they should be, and whenever I glanced too long at one of the customers, they would freeze mid-bite or mid-sip until I looked away. At 2:14 a.m., the trucker left, leaving a generous tip that shimmered strangely under the fluorescent light like it was made of metal I had never seen before. The couple never got up to leave. One moment they were there, and the next, the booth was empty, the fries untouched but cold. Fran appeared beside me without a sound, her pale hand landing lightly on my shoulder. "Doing good," she said, "but don't ever pick up what they leave behind." "What?" I asked, glancing at the tip on the counter. She looked at the shining coins and her smile twitched. "Especially not that." The bell over the door jingled again. I turned to greet the new arrival and froze. A tall man ducked slightly to fit through the doorframe. His face was too symmetrical, his eyes too large, and his movements too smooth, like someone acting out how to be human from memory. He slid into a booth, and when I approached, he greeted me in a voice that was a perfect mimicry of warmth but completely empty of emotion. "Coffee," he said. "Please." The jukebox stuttered, the song skipping backward a few notes, like a tape rewinding. Every clock in the diner stopped ticking for a heartbeat. I poured his coffee with shaking hands. When I returned to the counter, Fran was already watching Hymno, watching me. "You are doing fine," she whispered. "Just whatever you do, when he leaves, do not look out the windows. Not until the bell rings again." I wanted to ask why, but the tall man was already standing, leaving a tip of coins identical to the first. He stepped outside, and the door swung shut. The diner was silent. I could not help myself. I looked outside, through the glass. The small town was gone. The gas station. The road. The sky, everything had been replaced by an endless black expanse dotted with distant, flickering lights, like stars viewed from the bottom of a deep ocean. And in that void, shapes moved huge, slow shapes, circling the diner like sharks. Then the bell rang again, sharp and cheerful, and suddenly the road and the gas station were back, as if nothing had changed. Fran exhaled. "Do not do that again," she said. I nodded, clutching the apron tighter. The coins on the counter pulsed faintly, like they had a heartbeat. Part 2. The regulars who remember by the second night. I had convinced myself that the first shift had been a trick of exhaustion. Long drive. No money. Weird locals, it was easy to imagine things. But as I stepped through the door, the air itself seemed to hesitate around me, like the diner was exhaling after holding its breath. Fran was already behind the counter, polishing a coffee mug that gleamed too brightly under the fluorescent lights. She didn't greet me. Instead, she tilted her head toward the booths. "They'll all be here tonight," she said. "Don't ask questions, Jester." The first regular appeared at 12:03 a.m. A woman in a tattered floral dress, her hair done up in a style 50 years out of date. Her skin had a pale, waxy look, but her smile was soft, practiced. She slid into her booth and ordered pie in a voice that sounded like multiple voices layered together, just slightly out of sync. The second arrived minutes later. A man in an old army jacket. He didn't order anything. He simply sat, staring at the wall clock that ticked backward whenever my eyes weren't on it. One by one, they came. People who looked like people but didn't. Their clothes were decades or centuries out of step. Their movements were almost right. Almost. I took pie to the woman in the floral dress. As I set the plate down, her hand brushed mine. It was cold, far colder than it should have been. She leaned forward, her too-wide smile never faltering. "Do you remember me yet?" My throat went dry. "I don't think so." "Ah," she said, and her voice briefly split into 3 overlapping whispers. "Then you will." I backed away, nearly bumping into the man in the army jacket. He had not moved, but his eyes, flat and unblinking, were now locked on me. Around 2:30 a.m. Mark, one of the truckers who occasionally passed through, pushed through the door. The bell jangled cheerfully, and for the first time that night, I felt relief. A real person. Someone solid. He slid onto a stool. "Rough crowd tonight?" he asked. "You could say that," I muttered. Mark nodded toward the floral dress woman. "Regulars? You? See them?" "Sure." His tone was casual, but his knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "They've been coming here longer than anyone can remember. Sometimes they forget the shape they're supposed to wear. That's when it gets dangerous." The lights flickered, just once, but it was enough to freeze the room. Every customer turned their head toward me in perfect unison. Even Fran went still, her hands frozen mid-Polish. The jukebox began to play a song I knew for a fact had not existed. Strange, lilting notes that twisted in on themselves. Then, without warning, the clocks started ticking forward again. The moment broke. The regulars resumed their quiet chatter, their voices a little too soft to catch. Mark set down his coffee, his face pale. "You need to decide soon," he said. "Decide what?" "Whether you're staying or leaving. The Bluebird doesn't like indecision." I wanted to laugh, but the woman in the floral dress was watching me, her lips mouthing something I couldn't hear. Behind her, the windows had gone black again. This time I did not look directly, just enough to see a massive shape slide by, blocking out the few stars that had been there. Fran's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and cold. Eyes on your tables, not on the world outside. You wouldn't like what's looking back. The bell jingled as another figure entered. It was the tall man from my first night. He did not sit. He just stood by the door, perfectly still, his too smooth face unreadable. The jukebox skipped backward. The clocks stopped. Shift's not over, Fran whispered. And the diner is testing you. Part 3. The rules begin to change by my 3rd week at the Bluebird Diner. I thought I understood the rules. Rule number 1. Never stare out the windows. Rule number 2. Never serve anyone after 3:03 a.m. Let Fran do it. Rule number 3. Never answer when a voice calls your name from the walk-in freezer. I repeated them to myself like a prayer, clinging to the idea that rules meant safety. But the diner had other plans. The first sign came on a Wednesday night. The jukebox, usually silent unless they willed it, came alive at 11:59 p.m. Early play, a warbling rendition of a pop song that had not even been released yet. I froze with a plate in my hand. The melody was catchy, but wrong, like hearing a lullaby sung backward. The woman in the floral dress was already seated at her booth. Tonight, her dress was crisp, as if freshly laundered, but dust clung to her skin like she had clawed her way out of a grave. They are moving up the schedule, she whispered, her voices overlapping. The diner is testing the seams. I laughed nervously. What seam? The seams between what you believe, she said, and what you will soon remember. At 12:30 a.m., Mark did not show. The army jacket man did. He had moved from his usual booth to the counter, something he had never done before. His hands twitched as if he were trying to remember how to use them. When I poured his coffee, the liquid froze mid-pour, suspended in the air like a glass sculpture before falling normally. Neither of us spoke. Fran appeared beside me, her hand gripping my arm so tightly I felt her nails pierce skin. Do not acknowledge the shift, she hissed. Pretend nothing's changed. The Bluebird is watching. Then she smiled like nothing had happened and told me to check the storeroom. The storeroom light flickered as I stepped inside. The air was heavy, smelling of old rain and engine oil. The shelves stretched farther than they should have, boxers receding into impossible darkness. Somewhere among the cans, a voice my own voice called, Hey, can you grab the napkins? I backed out immediately. Fran stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. Good, she said. You are learning. When I returned to the floor, every booth was full. I knew that was impossible. The diner only had 6 booths. But I counted 12, each occupied by faces that blurred when I tried to focus. One Figatal Finn wore. My jacket, the one I had hung in the back room. The floral dress woman lifted her fork and tapped the edge of her plate. You are drifting, she said. If you drift too far, You will not come back. The army jacket man's gaze followed me wherever I moved. The jukebox cut out mid-song, and the silence that followed was worse dense, humming, like the air before a storm, at 2:58 a.m. The diner lights dimmed without warning. Fran stepped onto the floor, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. Shift change, she said, but her voice was wrung, cowing layered. From here on, the rules are suggestions. The front door creaked open, though no one entered. The bell above it jingled slowly, as if savoring the sound. Outside, the parking lot stretched endlessly rows of faded yellow lines vanishing into a starless void. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Fran, what happens now? She didn't answer. Instead, the tall man by the door finally moved just one step forward, and every clock in the diner began ticking backward again. The jukebox played the pop song from the future, faster now, like it was racing itself. The floraldress woman stood, her smile brittle. Time is not on your side, server. Serve carefully. I tried to breathe, tried to pretend this was normal. But as I glanced at the window just for a second, I saw my own reflection grinning back at me. Even though I wasn't smiling, the Bluebird Diner was changing the game, and I was no longer sure I knew which side of the counter I belonged on. Part 4. When the diner stops pretending, by my 4th week at the Bluebird, exhaustion had dug itself into my bones. I had been clinging to the idea that if I just kept my head down, followed the rules, and poured enough coffee, I could survive this. But on Thursday night, the diner decided to show its true face. It started subtly. A low hum in the walls, almost like machinery waking from a long sleep. The overhead lights flickered, but instead of the usual sickly yellow glow, they pulsed in deep crimson for a heartbeat before returning to normal. The air smelled faintly of copper. Fran was unusually quiet. She stood by the pie case, hands clasped in front of her apron, eyes locked on the door. They will come early tonight, she whispered, and they will bring the truth with them. The doorbell jingled not once, but 3 times in perfect rhythm. The sound carried a weight that rattled my teeth. The first regular to step inside was not the floral dress woman or the army jacket man. It was a child barefoot, wearing a school uniform from a decade long past. Her eyes were perfectly black, and when she smiled, it stretched too far. She climbed onto a stool and said, "You have been lying to yourself." Within minutes, the diner filled with figures, not the familiar regulars, but strangers. A fireman with melted boots, a woman clutching a bouquet of dead flowers, a man in a business suit soaked as if he had drowned. They sat wherever they pleased, ignoring booths and chairs, some hovering inches above the floor. The jukebox turned on by itself. But this time, it did not play music. It played voices, my voice, Fran's voice, Mark's voice, all spliced together in a chorus of confessions. You were supposed to leave. You were supposed to stay gone. The diner wants you. I backed against the counter. Fran, what is happening? She did not answer. Her form wavered for an instant, her edges blurring like a bad photograph. The clocks on the wall began to spin wildly forward, backward, then stopping at 3:03 a.m. sharp. The child on the stool giggled. Time is a circle, and you are inside it now, she said. The bluebird does not like when its pets think they are free. Every booth now contained someone wearing my face. Some versions of me were crying. Others grinned manically, tapping their fingers in time with the jukebox's distorted chorus. One of them closest to the counter leaned forward. "Serve us," it hissed, "or be served." The windows turned black again, but not with emptiness. There was movement out there, shapes brushing against the glass, too large to be human. A heavy thud rattled the diner, and a crack snaked across the largest pane. I tried to run. I shoved open the kitchen door, aiming for the back exit, but the hallway beyond was impossibly long, stretching into darkness that smelled of old rain and burning rubber. Each step I took only carried me deeper inside the diner. Behind me, the jukebox song had become a shriek. I turned back. The storeroom door was ajar, and from inside came a whisper mine own voice again, panicked, begging. Stay still, they hunt by motion. I froze. The whispering stopped. Then, slowly, a pale hand not mine slid around the doorframe, fingers stretching impossibly long. The tall man appeared beside it, blocking the doorway with his towering frame. His too smooth face had no features now, just blank skin. He tilted his head, the motion sharp and insect-like, and every light in the diner went out at once in the suffocating darkness. A single booth light flickered back on. The floral-dressed woman was seated there again, her fork poised delicately over an untouched slice of pie. She gestured for me to sit across from her. I didn't want to, but my legs moved without my consent. "You were never hired," she said, her voices harmonizing in eerie chords. "You were chosen. The diner feeds on stories, on memory, and you—" She reached across the table, her cold fingers brushing my wrist. "You've been feeding it well." The tall man stepped closer, and I felt the walls themselves breathing. The Bluebird was no longer pretending to be a diner. It was awake, and it was hungry. Part V. The check you cannot pay. The booth light above us sputtered, casting long, twitching shadows across the floor. The floral-dressed woman's cold fingers lingered on my wrist like a promise I did not want. Somewhere deep inside the walls, something groaned wood or bone. I could not tell. I tried to pull away, but she tightened her grip. Her eyes flicked toward the tall man now blocking the counter, then back to me. "The Bluebird does not release its stories easily," she said, her voices weaving through one another in dissonant harmony. "But sometimes it offers choices." The jukebox hissed to life again, static giving way to my own voice, distorted. "You can serve them forever, or you can let them serve you." The windows flashed guest, once revealing not the parking lot but a vast, endless highway twisting through a starless void. Figures moved along its edges. The regulars, my duplicates. Versions of people who had probably come before. They drifted like ghosts, following invisible roads that led back here, always back here. I stood, shaking, and back toward the kitchen. I am not a story, I whispered. I am real. Fran materialized behind the counter, though I had not seen her move. Her apron was spotless. Her smile raised. Everyone says that, she replied softly. At first, the child on the stool giggled again. Her voice cracked like glass. You already belong to the diner. Why else would you come? My mind scrambled for an answer that did not exist. Maybe it was the job ad I had answered. Maybe desperation for cash. Maybe the thrill of something unknown, but deep down, I knew. The diner had wanted me long before I walked through its door. The tall man took another step forward. The floor groaned beneath him, tiles bending as if under impossible weight. The booth lights flickered off. Total darkness swallowed the room. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then whispers began to overlap in every direction, some mine, some not like a chorus of secrets I had never told. I stumbled toward what I thought was the back door, but my hands met a wall where no wall should be. The diner had shifted again, reshaping itself into an endless maze of booths and counters and pie cases. Somewhere in the dark, the army jacket man's voice whispered, "Finish your shift." A single bell jingled audible except now it sounded inside my skull. I spotted a faint glow and followed it, heart hammering. It led me to a booth that had not been there before. On the table sat a check, handwritten in, looping, old-fashioned script. It read, "Payment due. One memory, one name, one place to return to." The floral-dressed woman's voice floated from everywhere and nowhere. "If you sign it, you can leave, but you will not be the same." I stared at the check. My pen shook as I reached for it, but when the tip touched the paper, the words shifted. Now it read, "Oh, stay and become one of us." The jukebox began to play again this time, a song I recognized from childhood, something my mother used to hum. It hurt. It was bait. The diner was digging into me, finding what would hurt most. I dropped the pen. "No," I said aloud. My voice cracked. "No deals." The air went still. The tall man stopped moving. For a heartbeat, I thought I had broken whatever game this was. Then the entire diner lurch tables slid, cups shattered, and the windows shattered outward into the void. I ran. The hallway stretched and twisted, doors multiplying around me. Every one of them led back into the dining room. My reflection darted across the stainless steel surfaces, grinning even as I screamed. At last, I found the back door again, something wearing its shapeband, shoved it open. Cold night air hit my face, asphalt beneath my feet. The Bluebird Diner stood behind me, lights blazing, cheerful neon sign buzzing as if nothing had happened. I sprinted to my car. When I looked back, the diner was gone. Just a dark, empty lot. But when I slid into the driver's seat, the smell of stale coffee and apple pie clung to my clothes. The radio flickered on by itself. The jukebox song, my mother's lullaby, played softly, even though my radio was unplugged. And in the rearview mirror, for a split second, the floral dress woman sat in my back seat, smiling that too-wide smile. The clock on my dashboard ticked backward once, then stopped. I am writing this now, parked on the edge of town, unsure whether I ever truly left. If you see a help wanted sign for a late-night shift at a small-town diner, do not answer it. The Bluebird will already know your name. It will already have a booth waiting. Because diners, like stories, are always hungry. And the check, it always comes due.